Hi and welcome to the Homeopathy Health Show. I'm Atiq Ahmed Bhatti, a fourth generation homeopath with over 25 years of professional experience and practice in this field of healing. The Homeopathy Health Show is the online voice of homeopathy around the world, promoting and raising awareness of this truly unique system of healing, which is suitable for all ages, young and old. Every week I invite guests from the world of homeopathy to come and share their experiences, their work, offer insights, and essentially talk all things homeopathy. Why not visit www.liketreatslike.co.uk and click on the radio and podcast button to listen to the latest episodes. So let's begin today's show here on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio. Hi and welcome to another episode of the Homeopathy Health Show here on UK Health Radio, and I'm your host, Atiq Ahmed Bhatti. Now I'm delighted to introduce my guest for today's show, who is Geoff Johnson. Geoff qualified as a vet from Cambridge University and ran a 4-vet mixed practice in the UK for 11 years. When his hay fever was cured overnight by homeopathy, he began his homeopathic studies in 1995, qualifying as a veterinary homeopath in 1999 with the Homeopathic Physicians Teaching Group. Now the owners started asking for treatment upon seeing their animals getting better, so Geoff achieved an RS Hom in 2001, making him the only person qualified in veterinary and human homeopathy at that time. In 2004, Geoff completed the dynamis course with Jeremy Sherr, and he now runs a very busy practice in West Somerset here in the UK. Geoff is a sought-after teacher in homeopathy and lectures widely nationally and internationally. He was one of the founding vets of the homeopathy at Welly Level School, which has now trained over 800 farmers. He has studied extensively with many of the world's leading homeopaths, particularly the Joshis, Jeremy Sherr, Rajan Sankaran, Scholten, and David Lilly. Geoff Johnson, absolute pleasure to have you on the Homeopathy Health Show podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me.
That's a real pleasure. I've been looking forward to it and excited, actually. So, yeah, what should we talk about?
Well, firstly, I love your sense of humor.
Okay.
I love the email exchanges. So just for the listeners, Geoff has an amazing sense of humor, which really makes me laugh because I do want to share this story, actually. I asked Geoff a few weeks ago, before coming on the podcast, if he would just send me a high-profile photo, which I use, as you know, on the social media channels to promote the podcast. And he sent me one of a Neanderthal man. And I opened it, and I was thinking, for that split second, you think, that's not Geoff, is it? And but thank you for that, because it was really funny.
Well, it's strangely, it's got a bit of a homeopathic side to it, because I'm really, really fascinated about why Homo sapiens, us, men, women, have so much chronic disease. And I think it happened because we just developed this brain that enabled us to leave the now. And I think that's probably what the Neanderthals didn't, and all of our other brother human family who have all sadly died out except for us. And I've always been fascinated from a homeopathic point of view about what happened like 45, 50,000 years ago to Homo sapiens, to us, where suddenly we started doing art and suddenly we started burying our dead, and we left the now and went into this world of art and fantasy. And I think that's when chronic disease began. And I've done a lot of thinking and a lot of research to try and understand what went on then. It was Jeremy Sherr said to me 22 years ago that chronic disease begins the second you leave the here and now and go to the there and then. And I think we as a species left the now, and therefore my interest in the history of all the hominid species is based in wondering why we're so sick today. So that's
fascinating. Wow, that was full steam ahead. That was you went straight into that. And that's
that's the reason I went to that museum in Spain is because it's the greatest museum of human evolution in the world. And why is the earth in the state it is? Why are Homo sapiens so extraordinary, so talented, and yet so terrible? And it must lie in the pathology that we have in ourselves as a species. And it's one of my greatest interests in homeopathy, and I've done a fair bit of research to think about it. And that was my reason for visiting that museum.
And this
What's
museum,
going on?
Which museum is this?
This is the Museum of Human Evolution in Burgos in northern Spain.
Right.
And it's wonderful.
You know, it's interesting, Geoff, what you just said, because that does, so it's so true, isn't it, that we are so advanced technologically. Everything is at our fingertips, literally, and the world's our oyster. And yet it comes to, and of course, I for the purposes of the show, I don't want to go into specific details here, but we all know that there are certain areas as far as humans are concerned where so much injustice occurs, and hate and dislike and atrocities, and yet we're so advanced on one side, like you've so eloquently said, and yet on the other side it's a strange seesaw we're on, aren't we? There's no middle ground, it seems, nowadays.
There is no middle ground. And as time passes, the polarity gets wider and wider and wider. And you just look at the Brexit, you look at the Democrats and Republicans, you look at everything. The world is in a state of extreme polarity. And human beings are so wonderful and so talented, and yet they are so destructive. And it's come to the point now, we're on a precipice. And is the world and the society as we know it, and even Homo sapiens, going to survive or not? And I think homeopathically, this is very important. One of the things that most interests me in my work is I discovered that someone's pathology is also their greatest talent. I'm sure you're familiar with this, but if you ask somebody, I always ask a question: if you'd been put on earth for a reason with the talents you've got, what would you have been put here? What are the greatest talents you have? And if you ask that in great depth and go into it further and further and further, you find that the person uses the same language that they use when they're talking about their illness. It's like our pathology, our illness that we deal with as homeopaths is the greatest curse we have, but it's also the greatest gift. And it's an area of great interest to me. I could talk about it more if you'd like to, but if you want to move on, we'll talk about something else.
No, please carry on. I'm finding it fascinating. I think it shows that you have taken a great amount of time pondering and reflecting, and that's something very close to my heart. I love to ponder and reflect, and now I very much observe the outside world when I am out more than ever before. I'm always observing things, and I'm observing people. And I know as a homeopath, we have that habit, right? Because, of cases and consultations, but the observations have changed to this, that why on one side are we happy with life, we're taking a walk in the park, and yet on the other side, there's so many disagreements and there's so many anxieties, and sometimes trials and tribulations are self-inflicted totally, because one has an ego, or one has something they just can't seem to kick off or shun,
An example, which is a theoretical example, but it's one I've been thinking about for the last few months. I went to India a few years back, and I went to see the Taj Mahal. And I had a very surprising reaction. I looked at it and I just burst into tears, because I thought it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen in my life. I thought it was just astonishing.
Beautiful. Absolutely.
And then I heard the story, the tragic story. I don't remember the names, but the Indian prince who built it because he loved his wife so much, and she bore him many, many children. And he built the Taj Mahal. He bankrupted his kingdom, I think, to build this astonishing mausoleum, which was a tomb for his wife. His grief was extraordinary, but the grief of the whole story is even greater because his son fell out with him. I don't know if it was about putting all the money into the Taj Mahal, and in fact imprisoned him in a fort about half a mile away. And the guy who ordered it to be built never went into it, and he died. And that depth of grief, whereby you would bankrupt principality to build a tomb for your wife, is pathological. If we all did that, the world would fall apart. And his plan was to build another one on the other side of the river, which would be his tomb. And if he hadn't had that pathology, he wouldn't have built the Taj Mahal, and it wouldn't be here for mankind today. And then I think, well, if I was to treat him before he started all this, what would I have given him? And I thought, a remedy for deep, deep grief, a remedy for the soulmate. There's a beautiful river, a beautiful white, graceful building. I'd have given him swan. And I thought, what would have happened if a homeopath had treated him with swan? Maybe the Taj Mahal would never have been built. Don't quite know how we got onto that subject, but this idea of your pathology is your greatest talent, I think, is a real keynote about why mankind is in the beautiful mess it is. And it's really important to us as homeopaths.
It's interesting, isn't it? Perception and observation here, because I went to see the Taj Mahal in 2004. And of course, it was amazing standing next to it and just looking at the structure and the marble and the beauty and the grandeur. And we went inside, and I asked one of the security guards where the tomb was. And there's a staircase that leads down to the tombs, which of course is closed to the public. And I peeked down. I asked, of course, permission. I said, can I just peek down just to have a look? And what was saddening for me, again, this is based on different sort of observations, isn't it? And what we pick up is that his wife is buried there, and that chamber, or that where the tomb is, that room under the grandeur of the Taj Mahal, is not laden with anything, and it's empty, and it's cold. And as soon as you come up those stairs, there's this beautiful building inside. And I came out of that and I thought, it's just amazing, because what you see is so different to the fact that his wife, who's deceased, is buried, and she's all alone, and it's cold. And yet there's this such a magnificent story as far as the Taj Mahal, isn't it? It's interesting, isn't it?
I think it's really interesting. Maybe if he had been able to choose the way in which his wife had been buried, maybe she wouldn't have been buried down there in that cold place.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Which makes it somewhat awkward to go back to the start here with my question.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that.
We have gone in. No, absolutely. It's been a thrilling conversation, actually, very, very informative. But I did want to ask you that, and for the purposes of the listeners who aren't aware, Geoff is actually a qualified vet, and it was through veterinary that he moved to homeopathy. So do tell us about this journey, which is really fascinating, because you qualified from Cambridge University. So that's in itself is a great achievement, and very humbling indeed. And you then later on actually worked for a 4-vet mixed practice near Exmoor.
Yeah, that was our practice, actually. I worked in many practices all over the country and abroad as well. And then my wife's a vet as well, and we finished up owning and building up our own mixed practice, cows and horses, sheep, dogs, cats, everything, on the edge of Exmoor. And I loved that. It was like, out in the farms, calving cows, lambing sheep, seeing the dogs. It was a real country practice. And I wouldn't necessarily have thought about doing anything else, really. But I went to Glastonbury Rock Festival. When was this? 1995, I think. And I used to suffer from appalling hay fever, like awful hay fever. And I'd left all my antihistamines and eye drops and everything at home. And somebody said, let me take you up to the healing field, because there's a healing field at Glastonbury. And the first tent on the right is the Homeopaths Traveling Collective, which is a set of hippie homeopaths who are still going now. They are fantastic. And as a qualified vet, I went in there and this lady asked me lots of, as I understood it, meaningless questions, which were nothing to do with why I had hay fever. And it went on for quite a long time. And then she gave me one pill. And I said, well, how many do I take a day? She said, just take the one. And I thought this was nonsense. Anyway, I took the pill and it worked unbelievably. I think this was a destined thing. And it worked so well that about 2 weeks after I came home from the festival, I looked her up and I found her. And I went to see her and said, look, it's come back a little bit. And she said to me, there's only 10 homeopathic vets in the country. You should be one. And I said, well, if you give me another pill and I get better, I will. So 2 months later, I was studying in Oxford with the Homeopathic Physicians Teaching Group, and my whole life changed for the better, because it's been a utterly fantastic 25, 30 years, or however long ago it is, that since that day of discovery and an awful lot of learning and just a broadening of myself in so many ways. So that's how it happened. And I was very lucky. This Homeopathic Physicians Teaching Group was a group of young doctors absolutely passionate about homeopathy, because they'd just discovered George Vitulkas. Right. And had all been over and had been studying out in Greece on his island, Alonissos. And George was bringing loads of new ideas, a great way of looking at homeopathy. And these doctors were really turned on. And I got, as a vet, to go and study with them. And it was the first time almost in my entire life when I realized that a lecture could be fun. I mean, my lectures at Cambridge to become a vet were utterly appalling, which I assumed they would be. You just have to learn stuff and apply it, and I never expect. And I was sitting there fascinated in these lectures, and these teachers were so alive, and the ideas were coming in, and we'd finish the lectures and they would all sit around, doctors and vets, until 2 a.m, talking about the vital force and cure and drinking huge amounts of beer. And it was just an incredible time of my life. Anyway, and in 1999, I think it was, I qualified as a veterinary homeopath, and I loved homeopathy so much that I did my human exams the same year and qualified as a human homeopath, I think in 2001, maybe. And that was it. That was my life on a new track.
It's I like that, human homeopath. Only 2 people have used that with me so far, and one of them was Tracy Simpson from New Zealand, and the other was actually Tanya Twentyman, who's also from New Zealand, lives on Wahiki Island. And we were having this conversation actually on agri-homeopathy, and, dairy cattle and mastitis and so forth.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm also a human homeopath. I said, pardon? And, it just sounded a bit, and I said, well, and she said, well, I'm just saying I'm a human homeopath, and I'm a homeopath for animals as well. But I do love it. I just think it just throws somebody off, though, when you say that, because you don't expect it. We just think of homeopaths as human, but wow, we're so far from the truth. And of course, you're a prime example of that.
Yeah. The one of the most exciting things about starting homeopathy in animals was, for 6 years at Cambridge, the concept that an animal would have feelings was never mentioned once. And I discovered that they are as equally affected by stresses as humans. They develop the same diseases we do from similar stresses, and they are just the discrimination between humiliation, fear, homesickness, grief. Animals are the same as us to an unbelievable extent, and they respond in the same way to these tiny little energetic doses. I suddenly realized I had no idea when I was dehorning cows and pulling lambs out of sheep that I was dealing with people. I think horses probably respond better than any species, including humans. And I've wondered why this sometimes. I don't know why it is, but the animal's disease. I mean, horses are so susceptible to grief. I've seen an awful lot of coughing horses, and I would think 50% of those horses' coughs came on after a stablemate had moved on or died, or they'd had to move house, or the owner had divorced the husband, or something like this. And then lo and behold, they'd be coughing. And so remedies, grief remedies like nature mure, echinacea, whatever, were so commonly used in horses, but in animals as well. The first great case that really made I was never going to turn back from homeopathy was a grief case in a dog that cured an incurable disease. And after that, that was it. I couldn't go back to just practicing conventional medicine.
It is fascinating. Honestly, it's just what you're saying and the examples and what we know is going on with treatment. But it sort of begs the question that because of, and we were having this conversation, certainly we were having a very deep conversation before the podcast recording itself, but have we got to this stage where on one side, homeopaths, you can't be a homeopath without compassion and love. Of course you can't. It doesn't work that way, because you have to be vested in something. You have to have that feeling of being attracted to somebody in the sense of getting them better, the vibrations.
Yes.
But now we see very much that disease. Do you think disease is also a side effect of a loss of compassion in the current climate?
Wow. Now, that is an interesting question. I think the biggest disease of all, which is the disease of Homo sapiens, and therefore consequently the state of the earth, is exactly that. I was talking to somebody 3 hours ago who was looking at all the different races on Earth, and the conclusion was that the white race has lost contact with its ancestors to the degree where it doesn't know how to relate to other people or to the earth. If you lose touch with the earth, you lose compassion, because she is our mother. And the conversation we're having is, how can we reestablish a connection of love to the earth? Because if it's interesting, you have organizations, Extinction Rebellion, things like that. One of the things that is really important is you can't just love the earth and succeed as a protester. You can't just love your family and succeed as a counselor. The love that you feel has to be for everything, and similar for everything. And that's what has been lost because of that loss of connection, that loss of understanding. It's you sometimes, I'm sure you do this as well, Atik, where you think, what remedy would I give to the world? What remedy would I give to the United Kingdom? What remedy would I give to that political party to try and heal it, to try and make it perceive, to take off its tinted glasses so it could see the world as it really is?
The beauty is the simplicity, isn't it, Geoff? Because now, if one mentions, as an example, let's go for a walk in the park, and it's almost frowned upon. That what do you mean, a walk in the park? It's better to just sit in front of the TV or use a tablet or mobile or just go out with friends. But that connection, that grounding, going to the park as and you, of course, as a experienced trekker, and I know you love nature so much, and we'll go into that anyhow. But you know that when you go out into different surroundings, a garden, a park, walking through a beautiful forest, you always end up talking about things which are not really related to what you would be talking about when you're at home, because your mindset is different. You're more grounded, you're more calm, you're more natural. And
there's lots of work done to demonstrate the fact that just 10 minutes near a tree will lower your cortisone levels, improve your sleep. Even just actually having your hospital room painted green is positive for your health. And so this is the great problem with the division we have of us and nature. And unless that can be reconnected somehow or another, I do not know where mankind is going to finish up.
There's a excuse me. There's a lot of it's become a very dare I say it. It's become a very me world, and like you said, standing near a tree, and even though for some people that might sound that's a very odd thing to say, but that's actually one of the most beautiful things to say. I mean, have you ever come across anyone who says, "Oh my God, I hate birdsong in the morning," or "Why are the trees green? I hate green. Why couldn't they be red?" Yeah. Nobody really says that in the grand scheme of things, right?
Absolutely. We all love it.
Yeah. Why? Because we are programmed that way. We have this, and there's a chemical reaction anyway, as we said, walking in the park or through a forest, and you're more calm and grounded. Yeah. But there's this love and this beauty that we have, and we seem to be almost forcing ourselves away from it. When I heard the deforestation in the Amazon rainforest, the lungs of the earth, this is bad, How can you go to that extreme? What if, God forbid, all the rainforests went? It's too late to actually say, "Oh, sorry about that. We made a mistake," because it's gone. That's it. You've finished everything off.
And when that's gone, everything else goes too. This is the other part of my life I've been very involved with is I've been a moderately extreme environmentalist for quite a long time. And I did take a couple of years where I did vastly less homeopathy and went on the streets about that. Delighted to come back to homeopathy much more full time, which I did because of COVID. But yeah, this business with what's going on with us and going on with the earth is the biggest question of the entire history of mankind, I think. Things have got to a point where we must evolve, we must change, or tragically, I think Gaia's finest child is not going to be here.
I'm going to go off slight tangent here, but you mentioned something very important about, the environment and climate change. And, pondering over this and looking and reflecting at this, we're talking about cars and carbon footprint and manufacturing and so forth. But I think that one of the biggest forms of pollutants, and this is just something out there, but is sadly the wars that are going on, the bombs, the missiles, the guns, the rebuilding of structures, after you've demolished them because of bombs. That's climate change. The amount of carbon is immense. It outweighs, it bazookas anything that we're doing, to be honest, as humans on a day-to-day life.
Yeah. There's nothing worse that can happen. There's a great, I don't know what we're talking about this, but there's a great book called How Bad Are Bananas, the book is called, and it goes through the carbon footprint of everything. And at the end of the book, it says the highest carbon footprint that can possibly happen is a war. And sadly, the world we live in at the moment is full of them.
Sadly. Now, going back to homeopathy.
One thing I'd like to say, Atik, which I just thought of, you said that homeopathy is simple and other things are simple, like a smile. But one thing I love to say to my students is that homeopathy is incredibly simple. All you have to do is perceive in your patient something that's not human. So you perceive a pulsatilla flower, or you perceive a sulfur, or you perceive a diamond, or you perceive a snake. That's all you have to do. We've got loads of methods, some fancy, some not fancy, some complicated and clever. That's all we have to do. What is in front of us that's in our patient that is not human? And that's it. That's homeopathy.
Yeah, that's actually so true, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we observe, just as when a patient observes us, of course, when they come, they want to feel comfortable, they want to have that trust, they want to feel empathy, compassion coming from us. It should radiate from a homeopath.
Totally.
Otherwise, there's always this feeling that are they listening to me? Thankfully, I've never had a homeopath. I'm sure you haven't come across one who's got that, where people have said, oh, they're no good, or they just don't care. All homeopaths do care. That's part and parcel of being a homeopath, actually. The first step is compassion, to love for creation, for humanity, to help healing, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And we are lucky enough to be doing a job which most of us do love so much. That we're so passionate about. That thing about being compassionate and really listening to somebody, I think that all that means, Hahnemann, the person who invented homeopathy, talked such a lot about the observing physician. I think he says it, 12 or 13 times in his book, The Organon. And I think what he meant by that was, to be observing, you just have to be in the now. And when you're in the now and nothing else is going on in your mind, the monkey chat is not there, then you can really listen and concentrate on and let sink in what somebody's saying to you. And one of the things I love in the last maybe 10 years of my practice is I've learned to be in the now when I'm with my patients. Not all the time, because it's not easy, but I've got a couple of little tricks I do. One is, I'll do it right now. As I'm talking to you, I can feel the pressure of my feet on the floor. And I find I can talk to you, I can think, I can behave perfectly normally, and I can still feel the pressure of my feet there. But when I feel the pressure of my feet, I can't talk to you and also be thinking, oh, what time are we going to finish? Oh, what's for tea? Because your mind only works at 2 levels. And so I sit down with my patient, I feel my feet on the floor, and I just say, what are you here for? And keep feeling my feet on the floor. And I think they sense that something happens in the air around us in the consultation room. And even if the consultation's over Zoom, it's the same. And they pour themselves into that space that's created by the now. And that's one of the greatest things I've learned in my as a homeopath. Do you agree with that?
I do, 100%.
Yeah.
Even I've had, and like any homeopath, sometimes people are very traumatized and they call you in a panic, and it's like, oh, please, I've got this and I've got that, and you think, hang on, let's start with your name, and then you say, whatever you've got, don't worry, I'm going to do my best to help you.
Yeah, cool.
And that just changes the dynamic, because when you say that to someone, and I've had someone say that to me many years ago, and it was a situation, and they said, I'll help you. And I thought that was the most beautiful piece of advice, the most beautiful thing anyone could have said to me. And it fixed 50% of the problem, because I just needed to hear those words, right?
Yeah.
I'll help you, no matter what it is. And that gives you hope, doesn't it?
It does. And that makes me think, I'll help you, whatever it is. And who is the person that, whatever you've done, whoever you are, will always help you, whatever it is. And that person's your mother. And so many people that we see in our consultations, when it boils down to, I don't know, what is it, 1 in 4, 1 in 3, wish they weren't loved by their mum. It's that very, very first love. And when that's missing, they're 76 and come to see you with their rheumatoid arthritis, and half an hour later they're talking about how they were sent to boarding school and their mum wasn't interested in them. And so to be a mum to someone is the greatest gift you can give them, really, which is to want to help in any way you can, whatever you've done.
That's so true. And again, it goes back to that same point, doesn't it, about simplicity? Because the mum, it's so simple, isn't it?
Yeah,
we all have a mother, we all have a father.
Yeah.
And there should be love there, unequivocal love, and parents can give you love just as we are parents. Is there anything we wouldn't do for our children? Of course not. It's all love, isn't it? It's love, love, love. And that reminds me, of course, of the Beatles, going off on tangent, but it is
Excellent.
so true. And it's, it's not just out there. There is a lot. Having empathy and compassion is love, and having love has this beautiful frequency, which can resonate with everybody. Nobody can say, "Oh God, why are you so like this?" Well, they do, but as far as speaking to people, as far as them getting to know you, if that love is so powerful, isn't it? So powerful.
Yeah. And so one sad thing that we hear in our consultations is we see a woman who's maybe lost her identity, got eczema, whatever she's got, and you say, "Oh, what's the problem?" And she says, "I'm just a mother. I used to be a teacher. I'm just a mother." And I hear that and I think, "Oh my goodness." And I do the consultation, but when they go, I always say to them, "Here, look, this isn't homeopathy, but look, there's nothing in the world more important than being a mother." But when you have a delusion that you're just a mother, that's real deep pathology. To not realize that is the most important thing of all. And to be a father, I got really interested in this. I got interested in the yin and the yang and the troubles between yin and yang causing chronic disease. And so I proved and made the new remedy made from testosterone, because we have lots of female remedies. We had estrogen and we've got mother's milk, blah, blah, blah. There's hardly any male remedies. And I made testosterone into a remedy. And I was really worried doing it, because I thought that maybe it would just be full of bottom slapping and fighting and wars and, talking about gutters. But it was only some of that. Most of it was a huge desire to provide for and to protect people. And I looked at the proving of estrogen and progesterone. I also made a new drug of progesterone and did the work on that. And the love of the mother was a different one from the love of the father. The love of the mother was to nurture and really, really care, whereas the love of the father was to protect and provide. It was terribly interesting. I got proved all the sexual hormones, actually. Yeah.
Interesting. Was that, how did you go about that? Was it just yourself, or did you have a team?
No, I had lots of different groups of people. I did the proving of testosterone with lots of doctors and vets in Bristol Homeopathic Hospital, and I did gonadotrophin releasing hormone at Manny Norland School with one of his years, and I did pineal gland, and I did that with a group of Dutch homeopathic vets, actually. No, Danish homeopathic vets. So it took me about 5 years to ascend the sexual hormonal pyramid from testosterone to LH, GNRH, melatonin, and pineal gland. It was a great interest I had, again, to try and understand why mankind is so diseased. As it's Jeremy that did all this, Jeremy Sherr, he also said that disease begins not only when you leave the now, but when there's tension between yin and yang. I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't know half the time that Jeremy was talking about, because I was just a cow vet in those days, really. But I thought, okay, well, what's yin? What's yang? Let's find out homeopathically. Let's prove these male and female hormones and find out what their essence is, and then prove the pre-hormones that, for instance, GNRH comes from your pituitary gland. No, it doesn't. It, beg your pardon, comes from your hypothalamus, actually. But that causes the production of all the hormones, the male hormones and the female hormones. And I wondered if that proving would give us a clue about what was going on before the split of yin and yang. It was quite a journey. Yeah, I mean, what has homeopathy given to us? So much. I mean, I didn't know what meditation was when I was a cow vet. I didn't know what Buddhism. I mean, I've been in Buddhism courses, quantum physics, goodness knows what. It is such a gift, isn't it, to open your heart, and your mind opens as well with homeopathy.
It's just amazing. I see it everywhere, and And you of course, you get this habit. I was sharing with a guest recently. I thought, because homeopaths are observant, then when they're observing somebody, not for a consultation, but just generally in life, and it's a family member, the beauty of homeopathy is because it's not judgmental. You've observed somebody, then when they do one day, let's say, ask you for help, it just makes life so much more easier and simple, because you already are aware of their traits and their psyche, and that helps you because you can actually then deal with them and relate to them, or mold yourself to them, which is only a good thing, right? That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, because you want to help them, and I know about this, and this is good, because and with a pure heart you can say, I can help you with this, because
a pure heart has got such a lot to do. You said the most important thing there, which is unprejudiced. Because Hahnemann talks so much about lack of prejudice as well in our consults, and that's also even more so actually a result of being in the now. And it's difficult though, really, because if you listen without prejudice, then I also struggle with the idea of, is there such a thing as personal responsibility? Everyone is a victim of their mother, everyone is a victim of their culture, and therefore, can you ever just say, blooming work harder, snap out of it, try harder, mate? Because there's a reason why they're not doing it. And sometimes I struggle with that, actually. I don't know about you.
It can become complicated, but I think it's a two-way process, isn't it? It's very much that commitment that's needed. This is a journey. Healing is a journey, and sometimes it's a journey that lasts one dose. Sometimes it's a complex journey. Sometimes it's a journey that lasts 12 months, 24 months, even longer. But what I do know is that homeopaths do certainly try their best. There's unequivocal commitment there, and I think that's just beautiful in itself.
I agree. But having been a conventional medic as well, one of the things about being a homeopath is that I have a delusion that there will always be a remedy somewhere that's going to work, and if I try harder and I can find it, then maybe I could cure this person. Whereas conventionally we have curable, incurable, and so it's always very hard to say. I find it hard to say. It's probably my problem as a homeopath to say I can't help you and it's incurable. I think George Vitaukas has probably got some very good advice for us there, to look at a case and decide one way or the other.
I mean, my personal approach would be in this situation is that you have to be very sensible and you have to be very realistic. It's not homeopathy or the highway. Life isn't like that. But I've found patients are so much more able to go through a healing process once you say that, look, we can do this, this, and this for you. I'm going to help you on this journey, but I also recommend strongly that you may need to go for blood tests. You may need to see a GP. Let's be realistic. Reminds me of Mark Twain, and he said, if you always speak the truth, you don't have to remember anything. And it's the same case, isn't it? Just speak the truth. Just be honest.
That is a fantastic quote. If you want to speak the truth, don't remember anything.
No, if you always speak the truth, you don't have to remember anything, because 2 + 2 is always going to be 4. If 5 people ask you, oh, you said to my friend 2 + 2 is 4. What is it? Well, actually, it's 1 + 1 is 2 and 2 + 2 is 4. It's still the same. Whatever way you go around, the answer is always going to be the same, right?
Yeah. So, I like that. I like that quote.
Geoff.
All I can remember about Mark Twain from the book I read is he gave a special trick where you can tell if someone is in disguise, whether they're a boy or a girl. And what he does is, whatever clothes they're wearing, he'd drop something onto their lap. And if they were a boy, they'd put their legs together because they were always wearing trousers. And if it was a girl, they'd open their legs because there'd be a dress there to catch it.
Oh, interesting.
That's actually all I can remember from Mark Twain.
Interesting. Geoff, you, alongside homeopathy, by the way, I was going to ask you, it's been an amazing conversation so far, but How is your practice and how are things going there? How are they progressing?
Great. I am loving my practice at the moment, actually. I feel in a good space in myself. I feel quite in the now, and therefore I have the feeling I'm really finding the remedies and helping my patients, and excited every day I get up to look at them. And because homeopathy is challenging. It's a challenging thing to be a homeopath. It's an awful lot harder being a homeopath than it is being a conventional vet, I can tell you that. But no, it feels great. And I'm excited because I have done some study with some homeopaths called the Joshis, a husband and wife pair. I studied with them many years ago. I've studied with them again, and they've come across some really exciting stuff, which I'm applying and finding massively useful. They have plotted the animal kingdom onto the mineral periodic table, and there's a lot more to it than that, but I love the periodic table. It's one of my favorite methods of analysis. Studied with Jan Scholten a lot with that. And now there's this new method of looking at the animals there. And so I'm really excited about that. I'm loving it.
And you're still lecturing, aren't you, at the various colleges?
I do a lot of lecturing. I was lecturing 2 days ago at Manny's College. I'm lecturing next week to the Japanese conference. I'm going all over the world, actually. Off to France, off to Belgium. Can't remember where else. But yeah, do a lot of teaching. I really enjoy teaching. I love sharing my excitement and my joy with others. And it's always fun as well to tell them about the animal cases, because they're sometimes sort of quite simpler, and people can see the remedy pictures in a dog more easily sometimes than I could see it in a human. And lots of teaching. Love it.
Brilliant. That's so good to know. Geoff, outside of homeopathy, you love going to festivals, wilderness, and also long distance trekking. And I remember when I first contacted you a few months ago, you did say to me that you were going for a month or so trekking. And how was that? How was that experience? And where did you go?
I just walked across the country, actually. I started off on the west coast and walked over to the east coast through some of the most beautiful and remote parts of England. And it was sublime, the beauty that is out there and the wildlife that's out there. But what I really like is just that process of walking, moving through a landscape for day in, day out, until nothing exists anymore other than the sort of amazing shock of jumping into a river, or seeing the mist rise in the morning, or the comfort of your sleeping bag at night, or the sound of the birds, and everything else goes away and you're just back totally in nature. Your mind stills and everything comes alive. It's one of my very favorite things to do. I'm walking the length of Scotland in September with another homeopath, my mate Ian. And it's, as a homeopath, we're really interested in energy. And I did a walk right up through Scotland 7 years ago. And I went through 4 different Scottish mountain ranges. And I thought this might be pretty boring, mountains all the time. But no, because the energy of each mountain range was so different. One was grim and forbidding. One was like just a collapsed civilization right up north in Sutherland. The rocks were so old and worn down. And then there's this incredible place called Knoydart. And it was just like the elf's land in Lord of the Rings. Every spring seemed to have magic in it. And it's that awareness of the energy around you, I think, is a gift that homeopaths develop maybe more than a lot of other people, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for energy, aren't we? And just to have the energy of nature around you and nothing else for weeks is my favorite thing.
Geoff, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Well, and you too. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been great, and I very much am looking forward to part 2.
Cheers. Well, thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed myself as well, and thanks for giving me the chance to drone on about homeopathy, which I'm famous for.
Brilliant. Thank you. I do hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the Homeopathy Health Show. Please do support the show by clicking follow on my socials. Remember, the more exposure the podcast receives, the better for homeopathy around the world. You can find me on Instagram by searching for @like_treatslike, and on both Facebook and TikTok by searching for @like_treatslike. So let's promote the voice of homeopathy on radio and podcast around the world together. Don't forget to visit me online at www.liketreatslike.co.uk and click on the radio and podcast tab. Here you'll be able to see all the guests that have joined me on the show so far, and of course you can stream on demand the latest episode to your mobile, tablet or PC. Until next time, stay safe and take care.